Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 331, Discipleship and Some Karmic Problems. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. It is only 30 pages, so keep in mind this is another one of those short lecture works by Annie Besant. Second and third links to my books, blogs. This will go under the spirituality heading. That's basically where I've been lumping most of the theosophical works, at least for now. In the future, once I'm at 400 editions, I realize I do need to recategorize things on my blogs, and I'm thinking about having a separate website solely for my book work, as well as journalistic sort of thoughts about literature. Anyway, it's an interesting work, and it's in multiple parts. The first part is a tacit defense of H.P. Blavatsky, essentially. Because at the time, people were saying, how can Blavatsky be, according to Theosophy, an enlightened intellectual master, a spiritual master of sorts? Now, because she has a potty mouth, and she chain smokes, and she loses her temper randomly. And Besant points out, well, while smoking, for instance, is frowned upon, doesn't necessarily mean that, or outward lack of self-control doesn't necessarily mean an internal spiritual lack of self-control. She points out, well, Blavatsky never wavered in her beliefs. It's just that when things got tempestuous, she wanted to smoke, basically. And so it's kind of wry. It's kind of like a brushing aside of some people's problems with Blavatsky, specifically as the central key figure of Theosophy prior. That Besant, of course, takes over after the schism, I believe, of Steiner and Anthroposophy, actually. Besant's basically in charge of the remnant of Theosophy. It also talks about karma in a more general sense. That's something that Besant tends to dovetail with basically anything. So, like, the idea is that Blavatsky's not gaining any negative karma, essentially, by her outbursts or her smoking and so forth. Her internal will and external actions are still all geared towards the spiritual. But it speaks more generally about karma, but really the defense of Blavatsky, and it's key in here, the explanation of what comprises an argument against or for someone being a spiritual master, is the bulk of this particular work. So I find it fascinating. Of course, as someone, I'm interested in Blavatsky's life in the general historical sense, more than many of her own spiritual meanderings. Really, I find Steiner and Besant to be, and Alice Bailey, to be more readable, Leadbeater, Charles Leadbeater, and some of these other figures actually than Blavatsky herself, who wrote quite a few works. I think that the latter-day theosophical materials, from after the turn of the 20th century, I think are like this. I think are more interesting, actually. So again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. If you're interested in Theosophy, you'll want to read this. Or in karma, in the more general sense. Keep in mind, though, this is a short work. This was an oratory. This was transcribed from an actual lecture or lectures that Besant actually gave. That's about all. Peace out.